venues. As you likely recall, each of the venues implemented a reduction in force of about 17% of full-time staff, or 33 total positions, at the start of the current fiscal year. Many of those were vacant positions, but about half were filled, and those staff departures are still top of mind for our teams. In addition to the layoffs, management of the Oregon Convention Center and the Portland Expo Center into a single team that now manages and sells both properties. In addition, the venue work group for Portland 5 recommended management of Portland 5 be consolidated as a single government, the city of Portland, and we're in the process of transitioning Portland 5 back to the city with an effective date of June 30, 2027. And in the last couple of years, we have two new executive directors, Cindy Wallace and Rachel Lembo, leading these venues. As you'll see in the upcoming presentation, at the macro level, the Oregon Convention Center, Portland 5, and Expo each face headwinds. Challenging conditions have been present since reopening post-pandemic. To address these conditions, the venues have taken proactive steps, including substantial layoffs, management consolidation, increased or added rents or service charges, aggressive sales and marketing, disciplined capital management and investment, and in some cases, the use of fund balance and reserves. Overall, the region's hospitality sector recovery is stalled. Visitor Development Fund tax distributions are expected to be slightly below year's support. Each venue receives operating support from those tax collections. However, the amount allocated to Portland 5 and Expo is relatively small compared to their overall resources, whereas at the Oregon Convention Center, tax support is about a third of its operating budget. The venue teams work diligently and creatively to submit responsible budgets that focus on maintaining high-quality service delivery, prioritizing venue safety, maximizing revenue generation, all while controlling costs. The teams continue to advance the council's priorities, strategic targets, equity outcomes, and climate action goals. And finally, there are several exciting opportunities being pursued, including a food cart pod and beer hall partnership with Prosper Portland, across the street from the Oregon Convention Center, interim sports investments at Expo, and advancement of the Expo future historical significance and memorialization committee recommendations. The venue budgets presentation will cover all of that and more. Ashley, let's jump in. Next slide.
All right, thank you, Craig. My name is Ashley Sloan. I'm the Merck Finance Manager, and I use she, her pronouns. As we move into the FY27 Merck budget presentation, I do want to briefly ground us in the financial realities that informed these budgets. Our venues continue to face real pressure. Since reopening from the pandemic, hospitality recovery has slowed. That directly affects operating revenues, transient lodging tax collections, and our ability to fund ongoing operations, deferred maintenance, and long-term capital needs. With that context, today's budget aims to be responsible and forward-looking, focused on balanced operations, preserving fund balance, and mitigating risk while keeping our venues operating safely and sustainably. To start, this slide highlights trends in government support. FY27 transient lodging tax and visitor facility trust account revenues are budgeted at FY17 levels, and recent forecasts don't estimate recovery of this revenue until 2033. This impact is significant. Flat or declining TLT and VFTA funding is straining operating models across all three Merck venues. Next slide, please. What we see here is that beginning in FY24, expenses have consistently outpaced revenues at the venues. Revenue has grown at 6% on average, but expenses have grown at more than double that rate at 14%. That gap challenges the long-term sustainability of these venues. The FY26 budget reductions and consolidation of the OCC and Expo teams did help narrow that operating deficit and bring those lines closer together in that top chart. But the chart below shows that with capital expenses added into the operating costs, the expenses outpace revenues. When this occurs, reserves have to be used to close that gap. Next slide, please. As a result of the trends we just reviewed, Merck fund balances have been declining steadily since FY24. The two key factors driving this drop are going to be those operating losses and capital spending. Because there have been no TLT pooled capital funding available during this period, the venues have had to cover capital costs directly out of their own reserve balances. Even with the corrective actions taken in FY26, the combination of operating and capital pressures continue to draw down reserves. And under the FY27 budget proposal, none of the venues meet their recommended reserve targets. I will now hand over the presentation to Cindy to review the OCC proposed budget.
Next slide. Thank you, Ashley. Good morning. I'm Cindy Wallace, Executive Director of the Oregon Convention Center and the Portland Expo Center. I use she, her pronouns. Next slide. Through our Space to Grow Fund, OCC invested $150,000 to support 7 local organizations in hosting events at the convention center, reinforcing the commitment to community partnership and equitable access. Our key equity metric is to increase the number of diverse group bookings. The Space to Grow Fund helped us to increase that number in fiscal 26. OCC has made ongoing investments this year in ADA compliance through accessible communications and digital design with a focus on Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, aligned practices across public-facing materials. Past investments include staff training and professional development through the National Association of Government Communications, CHAC's Digital Accessibility Training, and Access U, the leading conference for advanced learning in accessible digital design. OCC also earned platinum level recertification in sustainable events from the Events Industry Council. This certification is yet another step forward in our sustainability journey and as a leader in sustainable venues. Following a comprehensive 6-month renovation, our Orbit Marketplace reopened with a completely reimagined dining experience. Guests now experience expanded food offerings, including house-made pastries, gourmet sandwiches, and grab-and-go options. Integration of AI-powered self-checkout technology provides flexible service options while maintaining our commitment to personalized guest interactions. Next slide. For OCC, fiscal 27 is a year centered on stabilization. We are navigating continued financial pressure and market uncertainty while working to protect service standards and position the center for recovery in future years. Even within these constraints, there are opportunities to strengthen performance through collaboration, efficiency, and focused sales strategies. The current state. Pooled capital from transient lodging tax is being forecasted at 0 for fiscal 27, which puts a strain on our ability to invest in our asset and improve and advance our equipment, and hinders our long-term ability to stay competitive in our market. To put this information into perspective, prior to COVID, the TLT contribution towards pooled capital was on average $3.5 million a year. Since COVID, with 0 transient lodging tax towards pooled capital, we've had to continuously revise our capital project plan with an understanding that we will not be able to afford the necessary projects we planned for over 5 years ago. OCC has identified $57 million in deferred capital across 33 potential unfunded capital projects. These projects vary in cost from $120,000 to $7 million. OCC's regional economic impact is projected to decline in fiscal 26 and fiscal 27, as reflected in the budget performance metrics. Next year will be a challenging year for the hospitality industry, our hotels, and OCC. Along with measuring our performance by the amount of diverse group bookings, number of conventions and large consumer shows, and our economic impact to the region, we, along with our hotel partners in Travel Portland, measure our performance based on the number of hotel rooms booked in Central City. For 2027, we should have 167,000 rooms booked today for next year. We currently have 99,000, so we're behind our booking pace by 40%. Portland continues to lag behind our competitors, and the current state of our economy, as we saw in the news yesterday, is troubling. Hotel demand is down from this time last year. Hotel average daily rate is down from this time last year, and international travel is down 7% over last year. Consumer sentiment of Portland as a safe destination is still a concern. A convention scheduled for August of this year reached out to us in January when they heard about the ICE protests and the possibility of the National Guard being deployed to Portland. They expressed significant concern regarding the potential impact of their large Hispanic attendee population. Due to these developments, they requested to move their convention from August 2026 to August 27 to ensure the comfort and safety of their community. This move puts further strain on our fiscal 27 performance. While in Washington, D.C., just last week, we met with a prospective 2032 citywide convention client. Our proposal is due May 1st, and we wanted to get a better understanding of their needs so we could provide a comprehensive winning bid. During that meeting, the client shared that there may be board of director concerns around Portland's safety. We, of course, offered our assistance with navigating those conversations as we get further into the bidding process. Next slide. Our priority is making sure core services, just one moment, apologize. Our priority is making sure the core services people rely on continue without disruption. After the significant fiscal 26 reduction in force, we are operating at full capacity with limited flexibility. Our focus now is protecting service standards, supporting staff morale, and managing labor costs in a thoughtful and disciplined way. The number of conventions and large consumer shows reflect flat to negative trend in fiscal 26 and fiscal 27, reinforcing the need to operate efficiently and focus on stabilization. We're responding to budget pressures by managing costs carefully and identifying new ways to bring in revenue. We continue to activate dynamic pricing when we believe our customers can support it. We're in the final stages of adding food and beverage options to our exhibitor services center. We're in the middle of negotiations with a digital signage company that will generate revenue. We're streamlining processes, improving efficiencies, and advancing technology whenever we can. We're currently working with a consultant on how we can improve our parking services and integrate mobile payments, which would reduce parking equipment service and maintenance costs. We're wrapping up on an autonomous scrubber and vacuum pilot program and planning to introduce this time-saving possibility next fiscal year. We're in the middle of scheduling and timekeeping project that will integrate scheduling software and our event services software to reduce manual efforts around scheduling and time clock entry. And in January, we moved from manual daily event reporting to a real-time event software platform that every employee may access on any mobile device. This platform is called the Momentous Hub, where staff can review function schedules, floor plans, event documents, etc. This reduces the need for paper copies, strengthens version control, and communicates in real time. We're also, of course, prioritizing the maintenance and upgrades needed to keep our venue safe and functional. Now back to Ashley. Next slide.
Thanks, Cindy. Just as a side note, I didn't realize my camera, I need to figure out my Zoom. So I'm going to present right now without my camera, but then I might exit and pop back in. So just as a heads up, that's what's going on. Okay, thanks, Cindy. Before we walk through the OCC's proposed budget, I want to take a moment to connect what you've just seen to the bigger budget picture. These are two charts to give us a clear snapshot of where the money comes from and where the money goes for the OCC. On the revenue side, charges for services are the primary driver, making up 62% of the total revenue. Government support comprises 33% of revenue, and 4% is proposed to come from the general fund if needed. On the expense side, materials and services make up over half of OCC spending, personnel comprises 28% of expense, and central services are 16%. With that context in mind, let's move into the OCC proposed FY27 budget. Next slide, please. Here is a graph of the OCC proposed budget for FY27. Overall, operating revenue is budgeted to increase by 5%. Event revenue is increasing 3% year over year. Government revenue, however, is budgeted slightly down at 1%, continuing the trend we discussed earlier around TLT and VFTA softening. This proposal also includes a one-time $2 million transfer from the general fund to help stabilize the OCC's fund balance. Now, turning to the expense side of the OCC budget, total expenses are projected to increase 2% year over year. There are no new FTE included in this proposal, but the increases reflect normal cost pressures, COLA, step increases, and position reorganizations necessary to support operations. Materials and services are essentially flat year over year. Overall, this is a controlled year-over-year increase aligned with our goal of stabilizing the budget while managing unavoidable cost pressures. Next slide, please. With modest revenue growth and ongoing cost pressures, the FY27 budget for OCC results in an operating deficit of $1.2 million. The budget also includes $1.2 million in capital projects. These projects include plans that are of the highest priority, focused on core safety requirements, essential infrastructure, and protecting the guest experience. After accounting for both the operating deficit and the planned capital spending, OCC is projected to end FY27 with a fund balance of $6.5 million. Next slide, please. Building on the FY27 budget context I just outlined, the budget before you includes a modification of $2 million in stabilization reserve. As discussed in earlier slides, OCC continues to face post-COVID revenue volatility and cost pressures, and has already taken significant steps to reduce expenses and increase revenues. At this point, additional operating cuts would compromise required service levels and long-term competitiveness. The proposed path forward is a $2 million stabilization reserve to help manage ongoing industry volatility while revenues continue to recover. Another budget modification that is not in the OCC budget but in the general fund budget is a $3 million loan as a partnership with Prosper Portland to support a food cart hub across from the Oregon Convention Center. With that, I'll hand the presentation off to Rachel Limbo to discuss the P5 FY27 proposed budget.
Thank you, Ashley. You can go to the next slide, please. Good morning, Acting Council President Wong and members of council. My name is Rachel Lembo. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Executive Director of Portland 5 Centers for the Arts. Next slide, please. I'm going to start by highlighting 2 areas of investment this year here at Portland 5. The first is our Community and Cultural Arts Grant Program. This program was funded using $50,000 from Metro Council's Performing Arts Grant Budget Amendment in fiscal year 25. The grant program provides funding and support to groups who have historically been unable to access our theaters. 50 applications were received, and this year we'll see 5 new artists in our theaters. One event just took place, the International Women's Sports Film Festival, which included a screening of the film The Moment, a documentary tracing the 50-year rise of women's basketball, followed by a live conversation with Portland area coaches who are shaping the future of girls in sports. It was a unique and inspiring event. Families came with kids still in their jerseys from the games they played earlier that day. There were film festival goers and tons of lovers of women's sports. The final events will take place in April and June of this spring, which will include an art show, an artist talk with a local creative group, Portland in Color, and a breakdance show that will activate Main Street in June. Both events will be free and open to the public. This influences our key equity metric, which is the number of events produced by our Culture and Community Department. The grant program helped us increase that number in FY26, as you can see in the chart. With the conclusion of this grant program and reductions to balance our budget in FY26-27, we do expect to see a decrease in the number of culture and community events next year. The other area of investment this year was our facility condition assessments, which we completed this winter. The assessments provide a broad overview of observations, key findings, and recommendations with order of magnitude cost estimates for near-term and long-term corrective actions and capital renewals. While each building has a slightly different story, they all have significant capital needs. The FCAs estimate 30-year capital costs of $74 to $137 million for Antoinette Hatfield Hall, and $79 to $146 million for the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall, and 10-year capital costs of $9 to $18 million for the Keller Auditorium. The shorter time frame was used for the Keller due to the ongoing city discussions regarding a major renovation and/or a new Broadway-capable theater on the PSU campus. The assessments also note that several major assets have been replaced or rehabilitated in recent years, and that strong maintenance practices at P5 have helped keep systems operational. Next slide, please. To build our budget for next year, we start by looking at where we are right now. We have significant focus on the upcoming management transition. Our teams are compiling transition tasks and questions, and I'm meeting regularly with the city to discuss those details. There are still some significant unknowns. The City of Portland recently closed a request for information process to learn about potential future operating models for Portland 5. The goal of the process was to help the city understand operating model options and identify approaches that could work well in Portland. 9 submissions were received, each with a slightly different approach. No decisions have been made about a future operating model, and the city cannot select an operator based on the RFI alone. If the city decides to pursue third-party operations, they are expected to release a formal request for proposals by June. We're also looking at the future calendar and seeing some challenges. The 2 new East Side venues have broken ground. We anticipate that some Live Nation and AEG shows will shift from our venues to these new spaces. Other promoters may also gravitate toward them because they'll be shiny and new. On the flip side, Portland currently needs more venues. Shows often skip our market due to limited venue availability. As a region, we'll see more events overall, which could inject fresh energy into the entertainment industry. In the current year, we're seeing some softening in commercial concert and comedy bookings. We had just over 100 in FY24, 80 in FY25, and are currently expecting 65 in FY26. That's a trend that we're watching closely. We built this budget with an estimated calendar from Broadway Across America for 11 weeks of Broadway tours, but their final schedule has only 9 weeks. This is due to show scheduling, not audience demand. There are some exciting shows: Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, Alicia Keys' Hell's Kitchen, and Hadestown returning, but we have some revenue we'll need to make up with other shows. Next slide, please. The calendar challenges on the last slide will result in a decline in attendance and event-related revenues compared to this current year. Event-related revenues are down 3%, and the attendance is forecasted to be down 11%. As you know, our entire budget is driven by estimated activity and attendance. With those in decline, we had to budget carefully and creatively to maintain a positive operating budget. I'm proud to say that we were able to get there without proposing any staff reductions. However, our margin is slim, and next year will be fiscally challenging. We limited expense increases to those that were necessary to ensure successful management of events and to engage and support staff through the management transition. Our Youth Arts program celebrated the completion of the Youth Arts Council's inaugural 3-year term in this current year. At this time, the Youth Arts program will be paused until additional funding is identified. Our Youth Arts Manager position was part of the reduction in force last year, but then extended for 1 year with support from the Portland 5 Foundation. That position will expire at the end of this year. Portland 5 will continue to support youth performances presented by our local arts partners, ensuring ongoing opportunities for young audiences. The budget for our community and cultural arts, the presenting arm of the Department of Culture and Community, will continue next year, but has been reduced. With that, I'll pass it back to Ashley.
Thanks, Rachel. Next slide, please. Before we move into the proposed FY27 budget for P5, I want to take a moment to ground us where the P5 funding comes from and where the dollars are spent. On the revenue side, P5 revenue is overwhelmingly driven by event activity at 85%. This includes ticket sales, reimbursed labor, food and beverage sales. Government support accounts for 13% of the budget. On the expense side, personnel services represent the largest share at 47%, materials and services make up 35%, and the remaining 18% goes to central services. With that context in mind, let's walk through the P5 proposed budget. Next slide, please. All right, here's a graph of the P5 proposed budget for FY27. The total P5 revenue is budgeted to decrease by 3% in FY27. This decrease is driven by the lower Broadway weeks than the FY26 budget and a 10% fewer events next year. Government funds are down 1% with TLT flat, VFTA forecasting 6% decrease, while the City of Portland funding does increase 3% with CPI. Total expenses for FY27 are budgeted to decrease by 1%. Personnel is decreasing 3% year over year. So there are no new FTE in this proposal. There is an event custodian position that remains unfunded and unfilled, and the youth arts manager position is not extended into FY27 as planned in the FY26 budget. Materials and services are essentially flat year over year. With fewer events, we see corresponding reduction in event-related costs. Next slide, please. The proposed budget results in a small net operating gain of $33,000. While modest, it does represent a stable and balanced operating year, especially given the reduction in Broadway weeks and overall event volume. The budget also includes $1.7 million in capital spending. This is focused on essential projects needed to maintain the venues and support safe, reliable operations. After accounting for both the operating activity and the planned capital investments, P5 is projected to end FY27 with approximately $2 million in fund balance. With that, I'll hand it back to Cindy to walk through the Expo proposed FY27 budget.
Next slide. Thank you, Ashley. Next slide. The Venue Collaboration Project offers a chance to enhance our equity strategy by both improving access and the number of events. Our key equity measure is to increase the number of cultural and community events. We are currently sustaining those numbers, and with the addition of our new Senior Director of Strategy and Business Development, we will be developing a strategy to increase this number for fiscal 27. Since the merger of management teams with the Oregon Convention Center, Expo has extended the shared approach of technology equal access for all to ensure equitable access to technology for Expo staff wherever possible. This work focuses on supporting non-desk-based and mobile team members with tools that enable timely access to information and effective communication. As part of this effort, Expo staff have access to the iPad and email program, which helps bridge the digital divide by ensuring team members without assigned workstations can receive important communications and perform essential job functions. In addition, the Momentous Hub was rolled out to the Expo team to improve access to event information while working out and around the Expo Center. Expo benefits from a centralized communications and design function shared with the Oregon Convention Center, which provides accessible communications and digital design services across both venues. This unified approach ensures consistent WCAG-aligned practices are applied to all public-facing materials and supports equitable access to information for all users. Two of the cafes at Expo have been remodeled with a grab-and-go option that provides a variety of cold food, snacks, and beverages, along with integrated AI-powered self-checkout units. Like OCC, the intent is to provide higher customer satisfaction and speed of service. Next slide. For Expo, fiscal 27 is a year where we can keep building momentum while being realistic about a few key risks that could impact performance. The good news is we have several strong opportunities that position us well, especially through collaboration and market expansion. The current state. One of our biggest opportunities is the enhanced booking potential we unlock through OCC and Expo collaboration. By aligning teams and processes, we can package and position the venues more strategically, and we can pursue business that benefits both venues. Over the last few months, we recently booked Junior Volleyball Association at both venues over Memorial Weekend for the year 2028, 2029, and 2030, for example. Much of the projected attendance growth in fiscal 27 is tied to this collaborative approach. Larger, multi-day, and repeat events that benefit both OCC and Expo. Those bookings translate directly into higher attendance counts. Staffing levels remain a risk. We're stabilizing operations through the combined OCC and Expo management model, but we're still operating lean. If staffing levels get too low, it increases operational strain, which may result in service failures during peak event days. Expo has identified 22 million in deferred capital needs across 62 potential projects, ranging from 12,000 to 4 million. When capital investments are deferred, the impacts show up through increased breakdowns, higher maintenance costs, and missed opportunities to modernize the guest experience. Over the past year, we addressed several immediate facility issues through our operating budget to ensure the venue continues meeting client and guest expectations. We finished a restroom renovation in Hall C and repaired some serious leaks on the roof of Halls A and C this past fall. We're currently in the middle of a restroom repair in Hall E due to just discovered yet long-term leaks. And we've just discovered a water issue that's causing damage in the kitchen. Expo's fund balance is trending in a better direction, but it is still below reserve policy targets. This creates less flexibility when unexpected issues, as I just spoke of, arise. Next slide. Our priority is making sure the core services our clients rely on continue without disruption. We're responding to budget pressures by managing costs carefully and identifying new ways to bring in revenue. Through Levy's capital investments and the upgrades to the cafes in Halls D and E, we are enhancing the guest experience while creating opportunities to increase food and beverage sales, grow revenue, and encourage repeat business. We're working with the Port of Portland on an overflow parking agreement, and we'll continue to explore dynamic pricing when demand provides that opportunity. One of the ways we track whether these strategies are working is through regional economic impact, which is shown on this slide as a budget performance metric. For fiscal 27, the chart reflects a modest increase in regional economic impact, which aligns with steady demand and disciplined assumptions in the budget. The most exciting focus area is the sports pivot, but it's important to note that the revenue upside is not yet fully reflected in the fiscal 27 budget. This is still a strategic growth path, and as it matures, it has the potential to become a major revenue stabilizer. And although funds are limited, we're prioritizing the maintenance and upgrades needed to keep our venue safe and functional. Now back to Ashley. Next slide.
Thanks, Cindy. This slide shows the breakdown of where Expo's revenue comes from and where the dollars go. On the revenue side, Expo is the most dependent on earned income. Charges for services make up 91% of total revenue, with only 7% coming from government support and 2% from other sources. On the expense side, materials and services represent nearly half of total spending at 47%. Personnel services make up 37% and 16% go towards central services. With that context in place, I'll walk through how this operating model translates into the FY27 budget. Next slide, please. Here's a graph of Expo's proposed budget for FY27. Overall, Expo's operating revenue is budgeted to grow by 3% next year. The strongest driver of that increase is charges for services, which are projected to grow nearly 10%. There are two major reasons for that. First, we have Foodie Land returning twice in FY27. They come in June and again in July. So they double up in the year, which is great for our revenue. The second, our electrical vendor is shifting from a net commission model to a gross revenue model. That change aligns with OCC's accounting process, but it does mean that now we will recognize all of the revenue and all of the expense, which bumps up both, but it does not affect the actual net income. On the other side, government support is budgeted to decrease by about 2%. Reflecting the same softening in TLT and VFTA that we've discussed across the other MERC venues. Moving on to expenses, overall expenses are budgeted to increase 16% year over year. Personnel costs are flat, even with an addition of service supervisor FTE. That increase is offset by savings from the organizational realignment and lower variable hour event labor and lower overtime. And it's important to note that these personnel costs do not include the OCC staff time dedicated to supporting and managing Expo operations. The biggest change is in materials and services, which increase about 30%. Most of that is driven by the shift in our electrical vendor, as I mentioned, going from net commission to full gross revenue and expense. But beyond that, we also have an increase in event expense. With higher events, we have higher event expenses. We also have maintenance needed that doesn't rise to the level of capital work. Next slide, please. For FY27, Expo is projected to end the year with a net operating gain of $74,000. It's a modest surplus, but importantly, it reflects a budget year of stabilization. And that means Expo is projected to end FY27 with an ending fund balance of roughly $791,000. While still below reserve policy targets, it does represent continued stabilization and a gradual rebuilding of the fund balance. Next slide, please. With that context, this slide outlines budget modifications affecting Expo that are designed to both protect and stabilize and position Expo for future growth. First, we are requesting approval for one additional FTE service supervisor. This position is needed to support the expanded operational scope following the OCC and Expo collaboration. The next two modifications are not in the Expo budget, but are in the general fund budget, and they support Expo's longer-term strategy. The first is $1.5 million toward Expo Sports Futures. These general fund resources would support debt service tied to essential flooring and equipment upgrades in halls D and E. These upgrades are foundational to the sports pivot. The second proposal is $500,000 to Expo Future. These funds support implementation of the Historic Significance and Memorialization Committee recommendations, along with continued community engagement. Next slide. Thank you for walking through the FY27 budget with us today. Across OCC, P5, and Expo, the themes are clear. Our venues are stabilizing, but they are doing so in a financially constrained environment with growing operational and capital pressures. We focus this year on building responsible, data-driven budgets that preserve fund balance where we can, prioritize essential capital work, and maintain the level of service our clients and guests expect. Each venue has different strengths and different challenges, but the through line is the same: thoughtful planning, disciplined spending, and strategic positioning for long-term sustainability. The FY27 budgets reflect the best path forward under the revenue conditions we face today, while still leaving room to pursue opportunities like collaboration, market expansion, and sports pivot that can strengthen our future outlook. With that, I'll pause here and open up for questions, feedback, and discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you to the whole team. Great presentations, colleagues. Let's start with Councilor Rosenthal. Councilor, you're
Muted,
unmuted.
Councilor.
Come on, there you go. Just two quick questions. First of all, to Rachel, when do we expect the impact from the Lloyd Center and the Live Nation facilities? Is that going to happen in 27 or 26? And how big is that impact? And then the other question is to Cindy: is when is the next projected Cirque du Soleil event?
Thank you, Councilor Rosenthal. I can speak to the new venues. So we do expect that they will be open in calendar year 2027. So if there's impact on us, it will probably be at the end of next fiscal year. And it's a little, we're not, there might be some impact next spring. It also depends on how their construction is going, right? If they are booking out a tour right now and it looks like there might be any delays in construction, they're going to want to book with us to make sure that artist has a place to perform. But certainly if things are going on plan and their venues will be open, they would rather have that artist in their venue. So it kind of depends on the construction work, which is certainly progressing. I mean, I see the Live Nation one every day on my way downtown, and it just keeps going up and up. So we aren't feeling it yet because we aren't booking that far out yet. For commercial shows, we'll know a little bit more. I think it'll be more fiscal year 27, 28, when those buildings are definitely open and presenting, that we'll start to feel the effect of those new buildings.
Thank you.
And the next hold for Cirque du Soleil at Portland Expo Center is the fall of 27.
Thank you.
Greg had mentioned concerns over safety, and I'm wondering if you can speak to that a bit more, I guess, in terms of our national reputation. Like I heard that there was concerns over safety from federal immigration, which is different than safety concerns we might have heard about in the last couple years. So is there like a shift? Like safety is such a broad word. So is there like a shift in national sentiment? Or yeah, I guess are we seeing like Portland's reputation is rebounding, but now we're worried about safety and from like, the federal government or something like that.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's ever evolving. So there were just concerns whenever we're in the media, and in national, publications such as the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. We see a direct impact in our ability to sell Portland as a convention destination. I believe that we're also seeing a direct impact now in 2026 with business travel and leisure travel due to just the negative media that has occurred just over the last 6 years. So, unfortunately, in the summer of 2023, Portland was in the New York Times 3 times over that summer, about houselessness, crime, and open drug abuse. And so, and in 2023, we are selling into the next 3 to 5 years for convention business. So what happens today affects, our ability to sell today into the future, such as the example of the group that we met with last week. They're concerned, of course, their concern is around today, but they're looking at contracting us in 2032, right? So that's 6 years from now. But they're having a difficult time envisioning and trusting that Portland is going to be a safe destination. And there's a lot of risk there for them. And for a lot of the citywide conventions, their national convention is their revenue generating activity for their organization. So it's a risk to safety, and then there's also a financial risk. We see it ebb and flow. I feel that nowadays, and I do want to shout out to Travel Portland. They've taken this sentiment very seriously and have invested dollars into strategic marketing around this and the ability to combat any negative messaging in real time as it happens. So they're very proactive around what may be occurring and if Portland is going to be in the media. So with what happened at the ICE building and media around that, although the media wasn't as negative because there were blow up animals, and there was a little comedy around that. You layer that back, it's still very frightening for many of our community, and there is that fear for the board of directors of our convention clients that it would be a negative concern for their attendees and that perhaps they wouldn't want to come, so their attendance is going to be reduced, which then affects them financially, or that they would feel the attendees that may be directly impacted feel that they're not being seen or valued if the board of directors is going to choose a destination where they may not feel welcome. So it's complex. What happens today affects us into 2 to 3 to 5 years down the road, and that's what we're dealing with around safety. It ebbs and flows. I feel like it's softening, but it's still obviously a concern.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, lots to chew on there. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
I'll turn it over to Councilor Lewis.
Sure. Thank you so much. I want to thank you for the presentations. First for, I think being responsive to some of the questions we've had in previous years and the things we've been following as a council, but also for treating each venue individually while also giving us the trends overall. I think I'm most concerned about the VFIGA and our lack of ability to get down to that lower bucket, where we do see Merck getting funds from tourism. And I guess I just wanted a little bit more texture on the outlook of the forecast for the coming years and how many years it'll be before we get VFIGA funds for capital again.
Yeah. Councilor Lewis, that's a great question. There's a lot of conversation between the three governments, Metro, Multnomah County, and City of Portland, who all have venues that or sources of funding coming out of that agreement. Last forecasts were 2032, 33 before we recover to the collections that we would have achieved in 2019. So that's more than a decade, 15 years or so. And I always preface that our expenses are in today's dollars, but those revenues are in 2019 dollars. So if we're comparing collections to 2019 with the time value of money, that's not as strong a dollar as today. So we're chasing inflation there that's now significant. That said, the three governments have had informal conversations around the need to look at the structure of the operating agreement and recognizing that the recovery that we thought would happen, next year or the next year, and we just kept assuming it would be the next year, we're coming to the realization that that's not going to happen. And so now we need to have a conversation around the structure of the agreement itself and how it distributes its resources so that the top priorities can be achieved. So that's where the conversations are at. We expect in the coming months to engage more deeply. And it's, as you would expect, it's politically fraught. There's a lot of commonality, but there's also different priorities across the three governments. So we're preparing an approach right now and be looking to council to support us in that and actually take the lead in that.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Craig.
Okay, Councilor Noel.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks all for the information and candor. I want to start by giving a shout out to the cultural department's success and a comment that I hope we can find a way to close the gap that you're proposing in the 26-27 budget so that the support for that department's efforts aren't decreased. Second, we've talked a lot about, and you have impressive plans for growing out of the current gap, which I think is the only way we can long-term move forward. But in the moment, the budget proposes what I would consider to be razor-thin ending fund balances. And so in order to grow in fiscal 28 and fiscal 29, we have to make sure we are really managing very closely the spending and essentially the net income in fiscal 27. Can you talk more about whether you're proposing more frequent reviews of actual versus budget so that you can catch issues as they start to emerge and not have to deal with a much bigger gap if it's let to go for 3 or 4 or 5 months? Are you making any changes in your fiscal management practices for this period while we're trying to get back to a growth trend?
I can start. And then perhaps I'll pass it off to you all to talk about your specific operations. But Councilor Nolan, that has been a guiding principle of the Merck venues for quite some time. Sorry, you just all shifted on my screen. I have to find you again.
Right.
One of the benefits of having Merck is the monthly meetings we have with Merck where we present our financial information. So we have eyes on operations at a monthly cycle. In addition, I take pride in being fiscally disciplined, really aggressive in trying to grow revenue where we can, but also very smart about how we spend our monies. knowing it's so hard to generate money into the future. So that's the context that I've brought to the table with these leaders and Ashley and our finance team we're in a bridging strategy. We're vulnerable at this point in time. So aggressive revenue pursuit, smart spending, prioritizing safety, equity, core service delivery so that we don't see the negative repercussions of those failures, but we are in a very tenuous moment in time. So it is taking that additional discipline in focus. I'll hand it off to you all if you want to speak specifically to what you do in your venues.
Thank you, Councilor Nolan, for the question. This is like maybe my favorite question that I've ever gotten at a Metro Council meeting. As someone who comes in with a finance background and I believe was hired when I was brought to P5 as the deputy director. I mean, Craig was very clear, like P5 needs more financial management and needs to like change its structure. It's financially unsustainable. And I really felt like that was the part of the reason that I was brought in, is because I bring that background. Ashley has been a huge supporter with our team. She meets monthly now with all of the P5 directors, goes over their budget. She's sharing out a monthly budget to actuals report where they dig into that. We just recently went through a forecasting process, which is not easy, right? We do the budget in the fall, and then in the spring, I was like, hey, everybody, you're basically going to do the budget again, but you're going to look at this year and you're going to estimate where are you ending this year. It is a ton of work on top of producing 800 events a year, but they did it, and we found some areas that's like, well, why did we budget this, but we're now forecasting this? Like, what's going on in there? And then again, so many kudos to Ashley, who's just been a partner with our management team to dig into those spots and figure out what's going on. And I'll be honest, like there are definitely some areas where our operations aren't set up in a way that is financially beneficial to P5. And so now we are challenged with like this history of we've always done something one way, but it's actually financially harmful. And so how do we change that? And the first thing is really understanding what's going on and figuring out who it's impacting and then working out a new process. And I feel like we have done so much of that this year. And even, I get questions sometimes from the management team or even from staff that are like, why are we making changes now when there's this huge change coming? We don't know what's going to happen with this management transition. Like, what if we make a change and then just it all changes again? And I keep saying anything we're doing that is bettering our operation, that is making us more stable and more financially sustainable, is going to be a good change. That whatever model we're moving to, they're going to want to keep it. So it is always in our interest to be doing the change that makes us stronger, even if there's this massive change coming. So that's been our approach. And I think it's been really successful. It's one of those things that's going to take time. But again, I really appreciate our finance support for helping us to be able to dive into it. And I really love the question. Thank you.
Well, and it's a good thing you're in that position to be watching both the revenue generation and the expenses. Pinch those pennies.
And then for OCC and Expo, as I spoke of in our presentation, is that we are always looking for ways to generate more revenue as well as new revenue lines. So we will be rolling out some new revenue lines, and then as well as where can we exercise dynamic pricing with regard to perhaps food and beverage, restaurants and cafe sales, as well as parking. But when it comes to managing the budget and making sure that we are staying on top of it, I meet weekly with Ashley. The management team, so we have the same management team that oversees OCC and Expo. We meet and review budget versus actuals on a monthly basis. And then the team also goes through a reforecasting exercise in January after we've closed the first half of fiscal year. And then that way we will be able to pivot And we can be more agile around our operation and, of course, evaluate any hiring practices. If we need to hold, if someone's left, we need to hold for a few months. That's cost savings to the operation. So we're constantly talking about how we operate, how we can save, and how we can generate more revenue.
That is really good to hear. We have to grow our way out of this, as I said earlier. In the meantime, we have to make sure that there's money there for any hiccup that comes along, and we're almost certain to have hiccups. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go back around to Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Chair. Just prompted a question that regarding a little bit more. I'd like a little bit more information on the food cart venue that we're talking about next to the convention center. And do we know of any other economic developments going on? I mean, one of the criticisms or one of the concerns has been in the past that there isn't a lot of, shall we say, restaurant activity in the nearby area. And do you have a projection as to what the revenue might come in from that food cart situation?
I can take that. Thank you, Councilor Rosenthal. So the food cart hall, we will come to you in the coming months with a work session so that you can all get full information around this concept. But we're in essence, Prosper Portland owns what's called the 910 building across from the Oregon Convention Center. It's on the north end of the OCC property across from our plaza. It's been a closed down business for decades. It's often an area that we spend time with graffiti removal and litter pickup, and it's had its share of challenges over the years, including being quite an eyesore. So Prosper Portland is partnering with us, and our partnership is a loan to them of $3 million, and then they will bring more than that level of funding to develop the building into a beer hall, they're calling it. And then there's an outdoor portion of about half of that sub block is an outdoor area that they will put in. I believe the renderings have 10 food carts. So it'll be a 365-day a year, sheltered, heated location. Capacity of the beer hall itself is, I think, around 400 at peak. So it can scale up. It's also immediately north and adjacent to the OCC Plaza. So for really peak days, if the convention center had a really large convention, perhaps that street could be closed and people could spill into the plaza and it could be quite an attraction. You're right in that our neighborhood does not have a tremendous number of food opportunities. There are other economic development activities happening. One of which would be the Moda Center renovation. Conversations around that include increasing the number of event days and concerts where Moda Center is activated beyond just the current levels of activity. So those types of investments that bring additional people into the neighborhood and into the area will then create the financial ability for new businesses and restaurants to pop up and to come into being. So it's a long-term vision, but Moda Center will help us. Growing convention business in the future will help us. Having folks return to the office or more people moving into the neighborhood, perhaps with what's happening at the Lloyd Center with housing development there in the future, all of those will underpin economic generation for our venue. We will come back to you with more information, though, particular to that food for the beer hall and food cart pods. So you have full understanding of that in the coming
Thanks,
months.
Greg.
Thank you. My understanding, though, it's the food cart's basically a loan to Prosper Portland.
It
So
is
the
a loan.
revenues
It's yes.
goes to
Yes.
Prosper to repay us, basically.
In essence, we are loaning Prosper money they'll use to develop the site, and then they will pay us back over time with a 10-year horizon for full payment backed by Prosper Portland's reserves. So we're not technically at risk from that perspective. We're not an owner in the property.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I am just sitting here thinking a little bit more philosophically. There are many reputational issues we've discussed that are like national trends around our city, that are headwinds. But I also think that there are venue-specific reputational issues, challenges, benefits, however you want to frame it, that aren't really ours alone. And it comes everything from um, who our clients are and how they manage their rental, to our vendors. I have received communication from a vendor who didn't like that they had to pay for parking at Expo when it was obvious that in order to load in and load out, they were going to have to park, right? You don't take the max with your entire cart. I've heard communication of folks who didn't like the hours of the bar at a show. So many of these are reputational hits that we take as an operator for decisions that we don't make. So I guess just a little bit more philosophically, if you could respond to what we're doing to really keep the brand strong, or the brands, since there are multiple sites with distinct brands, um, in light of kind of this consumer is always right, highly competitive culture that we're feeling right now with new venues coming online.
Yeah, I mean, it is a fine line as far as how we operate and try and make everyone happy. It's a complex operation. We have our clients, we have our decorators, we have our exhibitors, we have our attendees, we have our staff. And so what we are trying to do is make the best decisions operationally for looking at what our expenses are, how we manage, how we can manage our resources, our services, our staff, how we can keep an event safe, and how we can continue to generate revenue on such a thin budget, as well as just less events in the next fiscal year. So we assess all of that when we're considering schedules. And so, for instance, with an example of a bar being open and or closed, we have to weigh along with our strategic partners, because we don't manage the food and beverage at either venues, OCC and Expo. However, we support their operational decisions because they use data to be able to inform them on those operational decisions. So it would be historical performance. It would be checking with other venues that have the same contractor and the same event, and how they have performed, what their hours of performance have been. If the location of where a service might be on a show floor versus a permanent establishment, what it would cost to bring in the food and beverage, are those items perishable or not? The labor what the labor would cost in order to do that, following any union regulations on scheduling. And the whole goal would be that in the end, there's revenue being generated, profit being generated. And some of the times decisions are made where we know that our guiding light in a certain situation has to be the customer experience. So we're going to make a decision and go into a situation knowing that most likely we're not going to generate as much revenue and or profit, but the overarching importance is making sure that the customer is happy and that the guests have an excellent experience. So it's not always that way, unfortunately, due to a lot of different factors that are involved in how we operate. And we have to, when we schedule, we rely on staff to show up for work. If staff don't show, then we are not able to operate as we have planned as far as the hours or the time frame of a restaurant or cafe. So that's just an example of what we weigh as management when we're talking about our operation and how it impacts the audience and the attendees.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I think as a public venue, folks kind of question what is the publicness, and I'm like, the publicness is the access. Publicness is how we do our bookings so they benefit our regional economy. And it does not mean that you as a Portlander are always going to have everything you want. We do have to make business decisions. So thank you for helping to explain that.
Sure, thank you for the question.
Great, thank you. Just maybe last question. Can you give us like how we should think about in the future when P5 goes back to the city for the overall kind of like venues department? Like, are we losing like economies of scale in some way, or is some general fund going to P5 going to be able to be reinvested in our convention center or expo? Like, yeah, how are you thinking about the future past kind of the P5 transfer, and what does that mean for like longer term sustainability?
Um, do you want to answer that, Craig, or do you want me to answer it?
Well, I mean, I'd like to start.
Okay.
I could.
I mean, I think we're going to say the same thing.
Yeah. Portland Five's direct costs of materials and services and personnel, the fund flow is actually from Portland Five generally back to Metro Central Services. There is monies that that the general fund occasionally will pay for certain subsidies or things, but generally Portland Five generates its own resources. And part of their expenses are the Metro Central Services that all of Metro shares. So to me, that's the greatest question, is with those resources going away when Portland Five moves back to the city, how do we make sure we're balancing whatever was using those flows of money back to central services? That will be a primary question, and that's been raised between the chief financial officer and our chief executive officer, and we're well aware, and we're planning into how we manage through that transition. But that would be probably the largest financial consideration in that transaction. And you all can answer that as well. I do have a couple of points, though, I want to make before we transition out to the next department's presentation.
Okay.
One is I don't want to leave you with the perception that transient lodging taxes through the VFIGA structure. There's this document called the Pac-Man chart. It's a very complex document that shows how tax collections come in and how they then get distributed to a series of public benefits, some of which go to the venues, some go to Multnomah County for housing support and services and those types of things. But the money we're talking about for pooled capital does not come through that portion of the Pac-Man chart. It actually comes out of the excise tax portion of the Pac-Man chart. So in essence, when collections are down, there's not enough resources to spill past the obligations that become pooled capital. So it kind of like the money works its way down, and once all of the uses have been satisfied, the excess collections of that year become pooled capital for the MERC venues. So it's a little different than the part of the VFIGA that talks about operating support. Second piece was between the proposed budget document and today, we went to the Visitor Development Fund, and the OCC did, asking for $2 million of operating support for next fiscal year. The agreement allows for the convention center to make an annual special operating ask. To my knowledge, we've never done it for this type of purpose. I believe we've done it before for World Indoor Track, where there's this massive event and we needed additional support, but we've never done it just for standard operating P&L type things. They did not grant us $2 million, but they did grant us $960,000. So that's an additional tax resource that will come off of transient lodging and motor vehicle taxes to support OCC's operations next year. And we set the expectation that this is not a one-year ask. We do have financial struggles. So in addition to wanting to talk about the VFIGA agreement, we're also communicating that we will need VFIGA and VDF support for operations into the future for OCC. And then the third point I want to make just to close is at Expo, we talked about a $22 million deferred capital. That's primarily in the modern halls where there's the deferred capital needs. We all know that halls A, B, and C are much older, 100 years older. All of their systems are basically end of life. And so that number, we're doing a facility condition assessment in the coming months on certain key systems within those to keep them operational. But this is all in the context of Expo Future and where's that campus going in the future. So we're not investing in much in halls A, B, and C for understanding that information because the prior information is the same as today. The systems are exhausted and we need to make decisions around those buildings into the future in order to know how to invest. That makes sense. I'm happy to take questions there. I just didn't want you to think it's only 22 million at Expo. It's much greater than that if you added in replacing halls A, B, and C.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for the clarification. All right, well, seeing no more questions, thank you so much for the presentations. And yeah, I think lots to think about as we get through some more difficult times, but it seems like we're on the right trend. So thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. We will move on to our next presentation. So we have staff from the housing department here. Let's bring up Liam Frost, our housing director, Val Galstead, deputy director, and RJ Stanglin, our finance manager.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, hey, Liam.
Hey, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties here, but I think as long as you can hear me and potentially see me, I think we're going to be okay.
We can hear you, we can't see you, but
Okay, perfect. That's the way I like it, acting president. Anyway, good morning, acting president Wong. All right, I think we've figured it out. Let's try that again. Good morning, Acting President Wong and councillors. It's good to be here this morning. For the record, my name is Liam Frost. I use he, him, his pronouns. I am the Housing Director for Metro. I'm also joined by RJ Stangland, the Housing Finance Manager, and Val Galstead, our Interim Deputy Director. Our presentation for you this morning is going to be brief. We're going to save some time for discussion at the end. And as we get going, I just wanted to share a few points to kind of ground us. We're going into year 4 as the young department that we are, and we spent a number of years stabilizing, growing, and responding to different political needs and also different system needs. We spent a lot of that time building up our systems to fulfill the commitment to voters. Spent a lot of that time negotiating with counties, and those were hard years for us and for our staff. To both pivot and to also build up lasting systems that we can rely upon for collecting data and analysis, for example. But thanks to our friends at HR and OMA and procurement, we had a lot of support along the way. But I particularly want to shout out FRS and give a lot of credit to RJ here. When we started out, when I first joined, we had Rachel Lembo, who presented to you just a minute ago. She served as the finance manager for both planning and for housing, and she was just fantastic. And then JM Ford pinch hit for a little while. But with the introduction of RJ, it was really well timed because we'd hired all our managers. And so at the beginning of this budget process, we were very intentionally starting from scratch again, or pretending like we were starting from scratch. And we reserved a number of hours with our managers to build out this budget intentionally. It's the first time we've done that as a department. And I can't thank RJ enough for his leadership in leading us in this budget. So thank you very much, RJ, for that. You'll see in the proposed budget in a minute, we're only proposing targeted investments to support potential future investment measures and also staffing stability. Now is the time to evaluate our opportunities and employ continuous improvement. We've set up shop, basically. And the charge to me is obvious. We have to regain public trust. And so that means focusing on the things that we are responsible for and doing them very, very well. So going into the next fiscal year, our priority as the housing department is to focus on credibility, as stewards of regional affordable housing and homeless services in the public eye. Next slide, please. So this is how we are breaking up our presentation for you this morning. We'll be providing the budget summary, and a brief slide on the progress we're making in our departmental investments, then the budget overview, a summary of our budget modifications, an update on our budget performance measures, and then a discussion with council. So without further ado, I think I'm handing it over to you, RJ.
Good morning, everyone. As Liam said, RJ Stanglin, he, him pronouns. I'm the housing finance manager. And I just want to reiterate, this is a team effort, and I'm really proud of everyone that was involved in doing this budget this year. It's a great skill to have, and they excelled. So it's only going to get better in future years to come. Next slide, please. So to begin, I'd like to just start about what are the main funding sources for the housing department. And as you can see, it's the two main ones. It started with the 2018 Affordable Housing Bond that was passed by voters. And then it grew when the 2020 Supportive Housing Service Measure was passed that created the tax revenue that we see. As you can see, affordable housing is now a smaller part of the overall budget, and that's just because they are ramping down in the 10-year bond forecast. So you'll see that SHS budget will probably keep growing even if numbers stay the same. The total budget funding for this proposed budget is a little over $611 million. It's primarily from beginning fund balances from prior year carryover, current or new SHS tax revenue, and then interest earnings. And then there's a small 0.1% of general fund that we're requesting for additional work that supports ongoing programming that isn't directly related with SHS and bond, but it supports the housing mission. I would also like to note that 95% of bond and net SHS tax revenue is dispersed to local implementation partners, which leaves only about 5% that Metro uses to implement these programs. Next slide, please. Now we will look at a fiscal year comparison from when I first started in the middle of fiscal year 24-25, our current budget for fiscal year 26, and our proposed budget for fiscal year 27. The main takeaways here is that the beginning fund balance is decreasing year over year, which is expected because as affordable housing bond program is ramping down, final approval disbursements are made, and then projects are completed and expensed. The counties for the SHS revenue, they have had significant spending of their prior year carryover. And Metro admin carryover also is dispersing about 32 million this fiscal year. So you will see that we are going to have less and less resources in the future. But because we started with a base budget, I think we are in good standing to have some stability given all the economic unforeseeable or unpredictable nature that we are seeing. We also know revenue growth from the 5-year forecast has slowed. In some cases, it may decline a little bit. You can see that with the interest earnings comparison. That's mostly also because we've dispersed the funding to the jurisdictional partners, and we don't have it in our bank accounts accruing interest. And then lastly, as we all know, costs are continuing to rise, mostly due to inflation, but also when I first started, there were a significant number of vacant positions that we're interviewing for. And this fiscal year, we have fully ramped up the housing department. And we see that again with the proposed budget. We don't see any reductions, slight reduction from the site acquisition team, but that's just because there's less work to do in the future fiscal year. And with that, I am passing it back to Liam, I believe.
Thank you, RJ. We're going to go to the next slide where I'm just going to provide some highlights of some investments that we've made over the last fiscal year. And boy, what a lot of change and a lot of movement in the last year. For example, I was appointed as interim director just about a year ago after the departure of our intrepid leader, Patricia Rojas. And then we also brought in an interim deputy director, Val Galsad, who you will hear from shortly. It has been a dynamic year. We also took the opportunity to make some changes in response to some of the workflows we were experiencing, particularly from preparing for potential ballot measures. We had to repurpose some of our staff. For example, the person you've probably seen as much as me has been Alice Hodge, who started as our executive assistant and has truly excelled in her role, supporting a lot of the political work that we do on behalf of council and interacting with council. We also combined our SHS teams into a division now led by the incredible Yesenia Delgado. And we will continue to further refine as we need to in response. But right now, we're feeling comfortable with the progress that new structure has made over the last year. We're obviously going to be, well, maybe not so obvious, but we are committed to continuous improvement and not being calcified in one structure, but being really responsive to what we need to do to make things happen. This feels like years and years ago, but we actually finalized and implemented the data sharing agreement last year. Way too late in the process, but we have it. We have that data, and we have an incredible data team that is collecting it, synthesizing it, and analyzing it just in time for the launch of the Regional Policy and Oversight Committee. I'm going to skip a few of these for the sake of time, but for example, we've talked about healthcare ad nauseum in the past. It's the area I'm super proud of. I'm planning to continue building the connections between healthcare and homeless services, especially in light of big reductions in healthcare and in homeless services. I think now is the time where we're actually tested as to how we want to prioritize system building as opposed to being reactive to emergency developments. I can't speak enough around our communications and engagement work. Both the previous Tri-County Planning Body and especially the Regional SHS Oversight Committee put a huge emphasis on investing in our communications. And my hope is that you've seen some of this work already come to fruition out there in the world, both in terms of earned media, but also some of the more community-based investments we've been making over the last year. If you feel like you have not received a briefing on that, we could absolutely provide you with that work. But what it all comes down to is the collaborative spirit that our communications team has led with our county partners, with service providers to build trust out there in the community. I also can't say enough about our affordable housing bond team. They're just incredible. Allison, Mercedes, Jimmy, Sandy, Emily Lieb. They're really not just hitting their stride, but going gangbusters right now. You must all be dizzy with the amount of ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings that are occurring across the region. And then the big one that we talk about a lot, which perhaps I'm not going to spend too much time on, other than to say what it means for the department, and that is the SHS reform project. The work plan that council approved in December. We're really hard at work at responding and to delivering on that work plan. And just as much work is supporting the RPOC. It is not just administrative logistic work. We received, I don't know, upwards of 10 different requests at that first meeting, all very different. And so we are now figuring out a way in which to review those requests, make sure that we have a touch point with the 3 councillors who are on RPOC. I share that minutia just to let you in on some of the work that our staff is carrying on a day-to-day basis. I'm going to pass it back to RJ and Val to talk about next year's budget. Thank you very much.
All right, next slide, please. So now we'll talk about the financial picture of our proposed fiscal year 27 budget, starting with supportive housing services and then followed by the affordable housing bond. SHS will have about $440 million in resources in fiscal year 27, primarily from the prior year carryover, the new SHS tax revenue for that fiscal year, and then some interest earnings. As you can see on the pie chart on the left, the majority of it is going to the partner implementations. About $400 million in both the partner implementation and the reserve and contingency make up the bulk. It's about a little over 90%. The tax collection cost is a little over $12 million. And then you can see that Metro admin with reserves is just a little over 5%, but that's because there is some carryover that is still there. It is for stability and just the unforeseen nature. The actual cost for implementing Metro's admin for fiscal year 27 is going to be 16.4 million, which given the forecast, it is going to be slightly lower than the revenue that will come in. So we're right on actual revenue to cost, with maybe a couple $100,000 in additional carryover. That's broken up on the right where you can see personnel, materials, services, and cap. The 7.4 million in personnel support 38 FTE, and the cap costs of 5.7 and the materials and services of 3.4 million. Next slide, please. And similar slide, but this is the affordable housing bond. There will be about 170 million in resources for fiscal year 27, primarily from the bond proceeds and the earned interest. There is a little, just under $1 million in general fund support that Metro Council approved a few fiscal years before to cover the forecasted deficit in Metro admin staffing. As you can see, again, partner implementation with the reserves and contingencies and site acquisition is the bulk of the programming, with Metro admin being very minimal. On the right, it's broken up with 1.4 million in personnel costs that support 7.3 FTE. That 0.3 is the site acquisition team doing some last projects in fiscal year 27. I think we forecast that it may end if the final site acquisition is done. There is still some additional earned interest that has to be decided on how to use it. So potentially if site acquisition is needed, we could do that too. I do want to note that the reserves and contingency of almost 40 million will be carried forward for future fund for future year projects if they're not needed in fiscal year 27. And it's all based on the project pipeline forecast. And with that, I believe I'm passing it on to Val to continue the overview.
All right, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so just to reintroduce myself to everyone, hi all, I'm Val Galstead. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the interim deputy director here in the housing department. I'm gonna just go into a little bit more detail about our budget overview for the FY27 base budget. So like RJ said, we have 45.3 FTE total in our department. 5 of those are currently limited duration. But as you'll see on the next slide, we do have a budget modification request in our proposed budget to make those permanent regular status. And we'll talk more about that on the next slide. There is a total of $4.3 million in materials and services spending. I just want to talk for a moment about the budget direction that we provided to our managers as we developed this base budget. You know, Liam talked a little bit about this process, and so did RJ. This year, we really brought managers into it, sort of starting from scratch. So we had like a series of workshops with managers. It was a very collaborative experience. And so we provided a lot of direction to them. And one of the things that we did in particular was really provide guidance on consultant and contracted services costs, providing guidance to our managers to really bring as much as possible our work in-house and reduce consultant costs, recognizing that we have a lot of in-house expertise within our department. You know, just that over the years, as we have been growing capacity, we have hired so many skilled and expert workers. And so just wanted folks to really think about bringing that expertise in-house, except when, you know, technical expertise was really needed. And as a result, we were able to reduce our contracted services in our budget in M&S by 44%. And that was a $1.8 million reduction for this fiscal year. And that's really huge. And that's just in the base budget. You know, we also provided guidance to really try to improve standardization and centralization across the departments, really trying to ensure that just, you know, across the board, each team was having sort of the same level of service. And then additionally, within the base budget, we tried to, you know, continue making investments in the SHS reforms, in the SHS and affordable housing bond integration work, and then in housing production and innovation. And I'm talking about, in sort of a veiled way, the RHCS work. Within our base budget where we could, rather than asking for new funding. Utilizing existing funding for RHCS implementation where we could. We tried to deploy staff intentionally to, resolve existing challenges, such as, political responsiveness or shifting FTE more to the oversight team, reassigning work to accommodate, new priorities like the SHS reforms. We really tried to tighten our belt in our department, for example, like with that reduction in materials and services, just to be responsive to the volatility of revenue, knowing that we need flexibility where we can get it. Given the current tax landscape, there's going to be less opportunity for us as a department to have responsive funding in the future, such as in 2025 with the admin reserves that we were able to deploy to the 3 counties. It's just unlikely we're going to be able to have that in the future. So what you see in our base budget is essentially, it's largely a status quo budget. We don't have reductions. But it does mean that the team will have to find efficiencies in order to do new bodies of work. We may have to deprioritize other work should new initiatives arise. We're sort of at capacity with our resources. Okay, next slide. I'm now going to talk about the budget modifications we have. We have 3 budget modifications that you can see outlined on this slide. So we have 2 M&S budget modification requests there. They are slightly smaller general fund asks for work that can't be covered with existing funding sources through SHS and affordable housing bond. Supporting future funding development work and RHCS that is outside of the scope of our existing programs. So the first one is for $220,000 in general fund to support regional housing coordination strategy implementation for this coming fiscal year. That includes some of the work to support the land banking work that's in collaboration with planning, development, and research. In particular, the housing department will be taking on an approach to innovative financing study. Additionally, there is the standing up of a regional listing service and more funding to support the operational stabilization work that you just had a work session on 2 weeks ago, I think. And then $150,000 in general fund funding to support sort of the potential, the exploration of a potential future housing funding capital and operational assessment. So what that looks like, the components of that include a market and economic analysis, a tenant survey in affordable housing across the region, an inventory and portfolio analysis, as well as work that evaluates and could recommend potential investment models for any future housing funding measures. And then our final budget modification, which I alluded to on the last slide, is the conversion of our 5 limited duration positions from limited duration to regular status. So these were added as a part of the FY23-24 budget process. They were part of an amendment that year. And that was the year that the department was created. And they were intended to add capacity as the department was growing at that time. We've had them for 2 years. We've had these limited duration positions for 2 years. That allowed us to spend time with these positions for a few years and utilize them flexibly. We have moved these positions around and evolved the work that they do over the last 2 years and have settled into a model, an organizational model that is working for us. These positions include staff across the department in internal operations, government relations council liaison that Liam was referring to earlier. We have folks on our policy team, communications, and on our oversight team within there. And we're requesting the conversion to regular status to really support departmental stability in the long term. And I'll just close out on this saying that really all of these asks, I think, are focusing on stabilizing our department while making investments to build a foundation for potential future funding measures and helping to set the stage for, I think, the next 10, 15, 20 years of our work and what we could do as a department while maintaining our current commitments. And I want to include the RHCS in that. I think that in addition to our work in SHS and the affordable housing bond, we've also committed to the regional housing coordination strategy. And there's an element of that can't be covered with our current funding streams. And so, we need to double down on that as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Liam to close us out.
Thank you so much, Val. Really appreciate it. On to the next slide, please. We're going to be discussing budget performance measures, and these are our high-level measures that you have seen as council multiple times. On the left, we have households placed into permanent supportive housing. In the middle, households stabilized through rapid rehousing and eviction prevention. And then the slide on the right reflects the bond work. Before I talk about the reforms on SHS and also going a little bit deeper on some of these numbers, I want to point out a couple of things. In terms of permanent supportive housing, the current data that we're receiving, the retention rate for that is up to 97% right now, which means it's a very, very effective program. I think RPOC is going to be discussing how many of those folks are population A, population B, and whether that is those categories are appropriate. But for now, I just want to focus on the fact that permanent supportive housing is a successful model for folks who are currently placed in those units. Additionally, I want to mention too that on the right there, the total number of bond units, each of these ballot measures was explicitly leading with racial equity, and voters approved both of those ballot measures to reflect the number of BIPOC folks who disproportionately find themselves in poverty or experiencing housing instability or homelessness. Currently, at a regional level, about 59% of occupants in bond-funded units are people of color compared to the regional rate of 28% of the regional population as a whole. On the SHS side, at a regional level, about 56% of people served with SHS-funded programs in year 4 were people of color. Now, with Council's adoption and approval of targeted universalism, I see there's a really good opportunity in the coming years to be far more nuanced and breaking down different demographics and the needs and obstacles that folks are individually experiencing as part of their communities. But I do want to say that in terms of following through on commitment to voters and providing services and breaking down barriers for BIPOC folks, I wouldn't say it's a success, but we've definitely made progress compared to previous efforts. All of this too, I want to say out loud on the SHS side, this is maybe the last time you'll see these goals at a budget presentation. I fully expect to come to you in for the budget FY28 budget, reviewing and proposing the goals and KPIs that the RPOC will recommend to Metro Council, and with your approval, hopefully by midsummer. So it's kind of the end of the first chapter here in this budget presentation, and we're moving on to the next one to be both more responsive to community need and responsive to council direction, to be honest with you. And I'm very pleased to be saying that. So we're going to move to the last slide. I'm under no illusions that the housing department is funded by 2 ballot measures, and that means a profound responsibility to voters, to taxpayers, and to the people who are being served by these dollars. And over the coming years, we know that we need to regain credibility in the public's eye. Now, it's not up to the Metro Housing Department to exclusively convince the voting public in the future. It is up to us to do our job well and to fulfill the commitments that have been made in the ballot measures. And that's what we're going to be doubling down on in the next year or so. We expect to do that hand in hand with our Affordable Housing Bond Oversight Committee, with the Regional Policy and Oversight Committee on the SHS side, and hand in hand with Council. I'm excited about this. I'm really looking forward to the challenges ahead because I know that we're up to the task. We've filled these positions, we have talent throughout our department, and we have a real zeal for getting this work done and for serving our community and the region. So with that, we're going to open it up to questions and council discussion. Thank you, Acting President Wong.
Great, thank you. Okay, colleagues, questions, comments? Councilor Lewis.
Sure. Thank you so much for the great presentation and as always for all of the good work this department does. Just a few questions. In terms of the housing bond contingencies that were in the pink part of the pie chart, are those contingencies in the bank accounts of the 7 housing authority jurisdictions, or are they with us? And at what point in time do we sum up how much is left in contingency at the end of projects to determine if we can do 7 little micro grants or if there's going to collectively be enough contingency when we wrap up in a year or two for one more project?
Thank you for that question. The contingency is more or less using it as the unforecasted pipeline with the assumed beginning fund balance. And this accounting is a little bit difficult because once we give the jurisdictions final approval disbursement, we keep that in the accounting chart until they report back. And they only do that twice a year. They just did the semi-annual last week. It was due on April 15th. So I haven't been able to look at where we're at, but by the end of the fiscal year, we'll have a better sense of what has been expensed out, and that probably will draw down. So the short answer is it's with Metro for the most point if it still hasn't been final approval.
Okay. Yeah, I would hope that a lot of these projects are complex and are going into contingency, but they've also been extremely well managed overall. So I would hope that we're thoughtful if there is ending fund balance at the completion of the projects to reaccumulate the last of the contingency dollars and not let them kind of sit out there. But to make something meaningful.
There'll also be some accrued interest too in the next couple of years that can be decided on how to use it.
Yeah, awesome. And then my next question is, in terms of the $220,000 in this budget for the regional strategy, it sounded like I heard several different kind of consultants or studies, and land banking was mentioned. I guess I'm just looking a little bit more. It's not that much money. Why are we trying to do 4 different things with it? Is it enough money? And are we just hiring a bunch of consultants? Are we actually building some expertise in-house?
I can take that. Yes, so the funding is for consultants predominantly. So for the land bank work specifically, that's mostly being held in the planning department, and I believe y'all are meeting with them next week, and so they'll be able to speak more specifically to that work. And I know that they're doing it in collaboration with Portland Housing Bureau. We did just sign an MOU with PHB, and if you do want to speak in more detail about sort of the structure of that project, I know that Andrea Pastor can discuss that, so can Emily Lieb on our team. But the metro the housing department component of that is really thinking about how to pair innovative financing strategies outside of LIHTC, outside of just looking at LIHTC, with land banking. And so that's currently being scoped as like a smaller cost for a consultant to really like develop a study of like possible strategies that could pair with land banking. It's not It's not funding to seed a land bank, to be clear. Yeah.
Well, I understand it's not seeding
Yeah.
to money to seed a land bank. That would
Yes.
cost millions, millions.
Yeah.
I'm just concerned it's barely enough money to do a consultancy. We're trying to do 2 or 3 other parts underneath that strategy.
Yeah.
And I remember at this point, I think it was 6 years ago, Clackamas County wanted to partner with us on a land bank. Now they're not as much a willing partner as Portland is. I just feel like once there's a structure set up, we're going to need to move it beyond just Portland. So we're going to need more strength. And I guess I'm okay with this amount of money. We don't have a lot of general fund, but I don't want us to dip our toe in the water and then immediately need to come back for more funds that we don't have in order to really regionalize it.
Sure. I hear that. I'll note that the bulk of that 220 ask is for the innovative financing consultancy. It's 150,000 of that is for that. The other components of the operational stabilization and the regional listing service work are much smaller because more of that work can be covered by existing funding sources. So yeah, it's looking to be 150,000. Really, and to with the goal by the end of 2027 of like identifying key barriers and enabling conditions for innovative financing approaches that are relevant to like regional housing priorities and alternative ownership models. And then like setting up, identifying a set of some potential financing or partnership models for further considerations and identifying trade-offs, sort of set up the next stage. But you're right, it may require additional funding. But we've identified that this is the body of work that we're able to do in this fiscal year. And therefore this is the cost for it. I don't want to underscore that it may require additional investment moving forward.
Yeah, I think it does lead me to think that we need to be really clear with our partners that we're taking one small bite and not owning this for the region. And if other partners can invest more, they should be off to the races.
Yeah, and anytime we want to use a general fund, we want to be really surgical and intentional in how we use it. And your question just gives me the opportunity to highlight that my instructions to our managers at the beginning of the fiscal year was we cannot use consultants to add extra capacity. The only time we want to be using consultants is when they have expertise that we do not have. And so that's been taken very seriously and extra seriously when we're using general fund for sure. And then a couple of weeks ago, Councilor Gonzalez asked us a question at a work session about we're spending so much money in the housing sector on consultants in the professional class. And Councilor Lewis, I know you've been working in this area for a while, so this is not going to be any news to you, but it's complicated because there's no money out there in the world. And so we're trying to patch together these different sources of funding with different requirements, and the timing of which is difficult. The other challenge is where's the economy going to go? What does our local landscape look like? And that kind of talent is expensive, and it is outside of our department. But you know all that. I just wanted to take the opportunity to share it.
Yeah, thank you. And Mr. Chair, if I can say one more thing, I am of course supportive of bringing staff positions into regular status and out of the temporary or limited duration position. I will just highlight, though, that I'm increasingly uncomfortable with how many amazing, talented folks we have at Metro if our runway continues to only be 4 years. So the team we have, we need to stick together. But this isn't the budget for it, but we need to start having real conversations about what happens if this doesn't get a renewal.
Great. Good point. Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, a great presentation. And secondly, I just have to reflect on how far we've come since 2020. It's been an amazing transition, and it's been very complicated to watch. But I think you've Liam and your staff, I think you've navigated quite well considering all the headwinds. I want to comment. I think Councilor Lewis's questions were well informed and really important. I just want to ask a little bit about that 250,000. Will it also include a nexus with the brownfields program? I mean, that sort of ties in with the land banking to some extent. And I'm just wondering about that. But my other questions have to do with, first, I noticed that in 2027, we projected the same revenue coming from the corporate aspect of the tax as well as from the personal aspect of the tax, whereas the corporate aspect has been running about 15 to 20% higher in general. I'm just wondering if there's a structural change that we anticipate there. And then the other question, we've had some benefit from having a little surplus revenue that we could, specially allocate for specific projects. It's been somewhat helpful, both politically as well as from a standpoint of shelters. Is there any way of, my understanding is that flexibility will be going away. Is that correct? So 3 questions. Is there a nexus with the brownfields program? Question, why are we projecting the corporate and the individual to be at the same level going forward? Is there a structural reason? And then the other question has to do with, will we maintain any flexibility for special projects or special requests?
Why don't I start with the financial piece? Thank you for your question, Councilor Rosenthal. I just split it as a 50-50. I know historically business is a little bit lower and the personal income is more, but the grand total is still the forecasted amount for fiscal year 27, which is a little over $344 million. I can adjust it as we get more information. I mean, we should be getting the April spike of tax revenue reported in the next couple weeks. And then we will see most likely that personal income tax is a little bit more, probably like a 60-40 split. I just did it for a budgetary reason because math was easier to divide by 2.
Okay.
I can take your brownfields question with an unsatisfactory response to say that we can get back to you on that. I think that given that that's with the nexus of the land bank work and that PD&R is really holding that, I expect that they'll address that next week, but we can flag for them to touch on that when they talk about their land banking work in their presentation next week.
Great, thank you.
And then your third question, could you elaborate a little bit more on that, just so that I make sure that we understand, and then either Liam or I will.
Yeah, up until this last year, there were funds that had been unspent in the reserve in the Metro Reserve, I would say the Metro Administrative Reserve. And my understanding was that because of changes in greater need for administration, we're not going to have that sort of excess reserve. I mean, I believe we took some of that money and allocated it to the city of Portland for shelters, which was a nice thing to do. And it strikes me that, or from what I guess you were saying, is we're not going to have that flexibility in the future because of our own internal staff needs or administrative needs.
That is correct. And I'm going to ask RJ to provide more specifics, but we allocated $15 million to Multnomah County, who then allocated it to the city of Portland, $10 million to Washington County, and I believe it was $7 million to Clackamas County.
Right.
That accounted mostly for that money that accumulated over time. We don't expect to accumulate that money again. In fact, any kind of, should we say, extra funding, we want to make sure that our structure as the housing department is nurtured, well taken care of. So we were fortunate that we had that ability and that council was able to deliberate on allocating that funding. I think additionally, and this is separate from the allocations to Multnomah County, Clackamas, and Washington for those purposes, but council with the COO directed us to develop criteria for our investments in response to federal impacts on populations and communities here in the region too. And so our team is working on finalizing that criteria so that we can be, what's the word? I use the word intentional too much, but putting up sideboards so that we can communicate to folks, here's what our money will be spent on, here's what it won't be spent on, because it is very easy to react to this federal executive branch right now.
Okay.
RJ, are there any details you'd want to add to that?
No, you said it. I forecasted a little bit more conservative on what the Metro admin carryover might be in fiscal year 27. I think it was around 7.5 million. Again, because the tax is unpredictable, you could have a lottery winner and we could get a huge influx like we did back in October. There was some uncollected revenue that wasn't really expected, and it will change the forecast. So conservatively, we have reserves to ensure the stability of the Metro admin department as it's budgeted now. Now, things in the future could change, and then you could make decisions on what to do with that prior year carryover.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't have any more questions, so great presentation. Last chance, colleagues? No? Okay. Well, it seems relatively straightforward and stable, so great work, and we'll talk to you soon. Liam, I know
Thank you
you're
very
a
much.
frequent flyer here, so we'll see you soon. Okay. Let's see. There are two presentations. So the remainder of our time today is reserved for additional discussion. If you have comments or questions about the budget overall or today's questions, we can discuss them now. Directors, finance managers, and COO Madrigal and CFO Kennedy are available to answer questions. So any questions on presentations or budget thus far? Councilor Lewis.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot, the work that we've done in diving in just barely to this budget. We're not even halfway done. Already so much of this work happens because of partnerships, and traditionally we think through our partners as our cities and our jurisdictions, but more and more our end partners are nonprofits. And while the business climate out there is something we all spend a lot of time talking about, the nonprofit business environment in Portland is really strained. There is an open letter that is actually not to us. It is to the governor, it is to the mayor, it is to Multnomah County Chair. And I just want to lift up that we should probably have an intentional conversation about how through our contracting and through our business practices, we are not creating even more harm in an already very fragile nonprofit ecosystem. I think we've been fairly good with getting ahead on things like reimbursement-based contracting, 30-day payments, but I just want to lift that up as something we should be thinking about. And I don't know if accounting, procurement, or COO office has any thoughts or comments on how we've approached that.
Thank you for the question, Councilor Lewis. And I think it's a really good point, and it's definitely something that we are keeping an eye on as we, set up these partnerships and different relationships with nonprofits. I think in addition to the things that you mentioned, the housing team that was just here has done a really good job of looking at the affordable housing program and making sure that the strain that we're seeing and how those deals were structured are that we're actually looking at those and making sure that the subsidy is enough to cover what it needs to, and using some of the interest earnings to make adjustments so that not only those projects get built, but they can actually be sustained. But the symptoms of that strain that we're seeing in the nonprofit ecosystem are a little bit different depending on what kind of nonprofit they are and what work they're doing. So it takes kind of drilling down on like the specific field to figure out what our options are. But the things that you mentioned, paying people on time, reducing barriers and paperwork while still maintaining, oversight and accountability. I think those are really important things, no matter, what field the nonprofit operates in. But I think it's a long-term strain. I've also heard, I haven't done the research myself, but that we have more nonprofits in Oregon per capita than almost any other state. And so, is there an opportunity for coalitions or consolidation or something that would allow the service, that spirit of service and that is clearly coming through in the number of nonprofits that we have, but allow it to get restructured and be a little bit more stable. And I don't know how that conversation happens, but I hope that is something that we explore as a community.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I also just want to lift up, P5 just last budget cycle started moving their rates so that there's a year ahead of predictability, because it's really unfair to ask nonprofits. Most of those performing art nonprofits use the same fiscal year we do to use rates that they're estimating that then actually get moved up after they've done their annual budget. So I think it's small things like that that have been noticed, and we should just be more intentional about telling that story, but also listening to what else is needed. Thank you.
Great. Additional questions? I don't think of anything on my mind. Okay, well, we can keep it short. So if there's no more discussion, I will adjourn the meeting of the Budget Committee. We'll reconvene as a Budget Committee on April 28th, 2026 at 10 a.m. for additional presentations and discussion. And I'll turn it over to Marisa for COO Communications.
Thank you so much, Acting President Wong, and hello again, councilors. I wanted to provide an update on the long-term operational approach for Metro South today. After careful evaluation, management has decided to transition Metro South to fully public operations. We will conclude the existing operations contract with Recology on December 31st, 2026. On January 1st, 2027, Metro will transition the currently contracted portion of operations to Metro staff. This decision follows a comprehensive evaluation of both a contracted model and a public operations approach. Based on that evaluation, we determined that public operations best align with Metro's long-term operational and financial needs. The decision is driven by cost, risk, flexibility, where the proposed contract reflected increasing costs without sufficient flexibility or meaningful risk transfer, combined with a single RFP response that limited competitive pricing. As a result, we are proceeding with cancellation of the procurement in the best interests of the agency. This decision aligns with the broader system context we've discussed with Council, declining tonnage, rising fixed costs, and the need for greater operational flexibility. Public operation of the transfer station positions Metro to better manage these conditions over the long term. We are planning a phased transition with the start date of January 1. Work is and has been underway to define the scope, staffing, systems, and infrastructure needed to support this transition. We recognize the importance of workforce continuity, so as part of this transition, Metro will create positions and provide opportunities for both Metro and Recology staff to apply through Metro's hiring processes. We will continue to keep Council informed as planning progresses. This is a significant operational decision, but it is intended to strengthen Metro's ability to deliver reliable, cost-effective service over the long term. I'm happy to take any questions, and I believe we also have Marta McGuire available, hopefully, if there are additional questions. If we could promote Marta, I see her in the attendees.
One quick question. How many Recology staff currently are operating at South?
I'm going to see if Marta has the answer to that off the top of her head. I know that of all the staff at Metro South currently, 50% are Metro employees and 50% are Recology employees. Marta?
Yes, greetings, Acting Council President Wong and councilors. My apologies, I was in the transition when the question and joining as panelists, so I didn't quite hear it. If you don't mind repeating it, Councilor
Yeah, the
Rosenthal.
question was, how many of the staff currently at the South are ecology, and are we going to have sufficient workforce in-house or transfers to be able to carry out all the activities?
That's a great question. Currently, there are around 50 Recology employees. As we shared in the council work session on March 17th, we do anticipate the number of employees that we would need to bring that in-house between 35 and 45. Because we are shortening hours or proposing to shorten hours at Metro South Transfer Station as a part of the proposed budget, we are reducing the overall total number of employee count at the transfer stations.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you, Marta. Anything else? Thank you. Nope. Okay, let's move on then to Councilor Communications. Councilor Rosenthal.
Yeah, I think I need to report on St. Andrews in Tigard had an ecumenical meeting on this weekend. About 300 people. Councilor Gonzalez and I attended. It was interesting in that they were basically, it's regarding their action for immigrant and refugee status people, and their concern, of course, was with ICE and some of that prospect. One of the interesting things is they had like 8 or 9 elected officials from all levels, state as well as county and city, and they had specific requests. They specifically requested Metro for $2 million. Their asks were for more assistance with police interactions, more assistance with job training or job screening, and more and some work related to rental registries. I think Councilor Gonzalez and I, from our standpoint, I mean, it was difficult because there was a complicated. They were complicated questions, and no entity can provide all the services that were included in that. I believe what we said is that the aspect through the counties, we deal with people who are experiencing homelessness or have the potential to experience homelessness. The counties can provide some services regarding carceral impacts or job need impacts, but beyond that, our hands are limited in what we can do, and we do not have direct involvement in rental registries, although several of the cities said they are looking at this. So anyhow, it was an interesting discussion on an unusual presentation.
Okay.
I would have to say, at least I personally committed to bringing this back to council and just mentioning what their concerns were, and their concerns, of course, were for refugees and for people with questionable immigrant status. And I said I would at least bring their concerns back.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, I just wanted to report back. Friday was the We Believe in Portland cleanup effort. Metro was a lead sponsor, and I saw a Metro team out there. I was out helping clean up the streets of Portland with my friends at Portland Opera, but we actually got a site right next to the Metro team, so it was fun to see some of our staff out there. Our logo featured prominently, and the effort brought out over 1,500 participants, and we cleaned 240 plus city blocks downtown. I think this is really good, not only to get folks out in a team building environment, thinking about what it takes to keep our city clean, but a good educational effort to think about what kind of debris. I picked up over 54 cigarette butts, and that was the bulk of my bucket. And I do hope that we can continue to support this event. In particular, I would like for us to get some sponsorship recognition that we can use for battery education, because that was missing. I saw some people putting batteries in buckets where they probably needed to be separated. But cheers to the Metro staff who took time to be out there, and I'm glad it's an event we sponsor. Lots of success.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. Thank you all for exercising your Zoom skills again. Seeing no further discussion, the council session is adjourned. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for April 23rd at 10 a.m. See you then.